Hey guys, tonight we're taking a truly chilling journey deep into the heart of ancient Rome, a civilization famed for its laws, its order, and its pragmatic approach to life. But we're not focusing on its grand temples or its sophisticated legal system. Instead, we're pulling back the veil to uncover the disturbing rituals of ancient Roman funerals. Forget solemn, dignified farewells and peaceful repose. You're about to discover a grim reality where death was a dramatic spectacle, filled with elaborate performances, immense displays of status, and a pervasive fear of the restless dead, designed to ensure not just eternal peace for the deceased, but continued influence for the living. This wasn't a private moment of grief. It was a complex, often terrifying, public ritual that shaped the very fabric of Roman society. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the immediate aftermath of a loved one's passing without longing for a simpler, less performative, and far less unsettling form of mourning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you right now? Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly standing in a dimly lit, hushed room within a prominent Roman household, perhaps in Rome itself. Around the 1st or 2nd century CE, the air is thick with the pervasive smell of death, mingled with the faint, cloying scent of perfumes and embalming spices. A loved one, perhaps a respected paterfamilias, head of the family, has just taken their last breath, but there is no immediate rush to lament or prepare for burial. Instead, a series of immediate, chilling rituals begins, transforming the solemn moment of passing into a complex, often terrifying, prelude to eternity. This is the death watch, and the immediate, chilling rituals surrounding death are designed to ensure the spirit's peaceful departure, but also to confirm the finality of death in a disturbing way. The moment of death in ancient Rome was shrouded in intricate rituals designed to ensure the proper transition of the soul from the world of the living to the realm of the dead. This wasn't merely a private family affair. It was a series of vital steps to protect both the deceased spirit and the living family from potential malevolent influences. The very first chilling ritual was the conclamatio conclamation, literally calling out. Immediately upon the presumed death, family members, particularly women, would gather around the deceased's body and loudly call out their name, sometimes repeatedly, for a prolonged period. This wasn't just a spontaneous outpouring of grief, it was a deliberate, ritualized act, designed to ensure that the person was truly dead and not merely in a coma or deep sleep. Imagine frantically shouting the name of your loved one, listening for any response, desperately trying to discern if life still lingered, all while the silence of the room mocked your efforts. It truly sucked to yell at a dead body, just to make sure. Following the conclamatio, the deceased body would undergo a series of immediate preparations within the home, performed by female family members and specialized female attendants known as pullingtores, though these were often undertakers' assistants rather than family. These preparations were designed to prepare the body for its public display and subsequent disposal, ensuring both ritual purity and a presentable appearance. Despite the grim reality of death, washing and anointing the body would be meticulously washed, typically with warm water and scented oils, sometimes mixed with spices or wine. This act of purification was believed to cleanse the deceased of any impurities acquired in life and prepare them for their journey. Imagine the intimacy of washing the lifeless body of your loved one, tenderly cleansing their skin, anointing them with perfumed oils, masking the scent of death with sweet fragrances. Dressing. The deceased would then be dressed in their finest clothes, typically a toga for a male citizen or a stola and palla for a female. For magistrates or important officials, Their robes of office might be used. This dressing was a crucial act of conferring dignity and status upon the deceased, ensuring they presented a respectable appearance in death, reflecting their standing in life. Symbolic coin placement. A single coin, often an obelisk, a small bronze or silver coin, would be placed either in the mouth of the deceased under the tongue or sometimes over one of their eyes. This coin was intended as payment for Karen, the ferryman of the underworld, who would transport the soul across the river Styx to the realm of the dead. Without this payment, the soul was believed to be condemned to wander the banks of the Styx eternally. Unable to find rest. Imagine the chilling act of placing a coin in the mouth of your deceased loved one, a silent symbolic transaction for their passage to the afterlife, emphasizing the grim reality of the underworld. It truly sucked to have your afterlife depend on loose change. Closing the eyes. The deceased's eyes would be gently closed, bringing a sense of peaceful repose to their face. The libidinarius for wealthy families, a professional undertaker. The libidinarius would be summoned. He was the manager of the funeral, handling all practical arrangements, including embalming if requested. The Roman embalming was far less sophisticated than Egyptian mummification, usually involving simple anointing and dressing, hiring professional mourners, and arranging the procession. His presence signified the family's ability to afford an elaborate funeral, a crucial display of social status even in death. After these initial preparations, the deceased's body would be laid out on a funerary couch, lectus funebrius, in the atrium main reception hall of the house. This was the period of expositio, lying in state, where the body would be publicly displayed for several days, typically 3 to 7, depending on social status and the onset of decay. The feet would often be pointed towards the door, symbolically ready for departure. The purpose of this public display was multifold. Public notification. It allowed friends, relatives and clients to pay their respects, to confirm the death, and to witness the initial mourning. Display of status for wealthy families. The elaborate display of the deceased dressed in their finest, surrounded by symbols of their achievements, was a powerful demonstration of their social standing and continued influence. Preventing premature burial. The multi-day display also served a practical purpose, ensuring that the person was truly dead and preventing premature burial. A terrifying fear in ancient times. During this period of lying in state, a branch of cypress or pine would be placed outside the door of the house. This served as a public warning, indicating that a death had occurred within, and ritually marking the house as impure, signalling to passers-by to avoid contamination. Imagine the grim sight of that branch, swaying in the breeze, a silent herald of death within the household, separating the grieving family from the rest of the community. It truly sucked to have a dead tree announce your loved one's passing. The mourning period within the home would be intense, particularly for the female family members. They would often tear their hair, rend their clothes, beat their breasts, and wail loudly ululatio, expressing profound grief. These were not just spontaneous outbursts, they were also ritualized acts of mourning, expected responses designed to publicly demonstrate the family's sorrow and status. Professional female mourners, praeficae, would often be hired to lead these lamentations, ensuring the proper level of public grief and amplifying the display of sorrow, this performative aspect of mourning. However genuine the underlying grief, added another layer of prescribed behaviour to an already traumatic event. The lack of modern methods for preserving a body meant that decomposition would inevitably begin during this multi-day display, especially in the warm Roman climate. Despite attempts at anointing with oils, the body would subtly begin to decay, emitting a faint odour that would mingle with the perfumes. This grim reality underscored the transient nature of even the most powerful human form, preparing the living for the inevitable disposal. One common misconception is that all ancient Roman funerals were elaborate and involved multi-day public displays. In reality, the grandeur and duration of the death watch and lying in state varied significantly according to the social status and wealth of the deceased and their family. While wealthy aristocrats might have elaborate public displays for many days, common citizens and the poor would have much simpler, swifter, and often less public rites, frequently involving immediate burial due to practical and financial constraints. The elaborate rituals were a privilege of the elite, designed to reinforce social hierarchy even in death. Historians still meticulously study Roman legal texts concerning funerals, e.g., the 12 tables and later sumptuary laws that tried to regulate funeral expenses, Roman literary accounts, e.g., Plutarch's biographies, Livy's histories, satirical poetry, and archaeological findings from Roman tombs and cemeteries to understand the precise customs, social stratification, and variations in death rituals across different social classes and periods. Furthermore, the pervasive belief in restless spirits, lemures or larvae, added another layer of anxiety to the death watch. If the proper rituals were not performed, or if the transition of the soul was somehow incomplete, the deceased spirit might linger in the house, haunting the living, bringing misfortune or illness. This fear of angered or trapped spirits ensured meticulous adherence to every ritual, however strange, as a vital act of self-preservation for the living. Your attempts to mourn were also about protecting your living family. The role of the funeral as a social and political event, even in this initial phase, was crucial. It allowed the surviving family to publicly demonstrate their wealth, their connections, and their adherence to Roman tradition, reinforcing their standing in society. This blending of personal grief with public performance added a layer of complexity and pressure to an already difficult time, ensuring that even death was a meticulously managed social affair. So, your journey into ancient Roman death rituals began with the Death Watch, a period of immediate, chilling rituals that transformed the passing of a loved one into a complex prelude to eternity. From the solemn conclamatio to the meticulous preparation of the body and its public display, every step was designed to ensure the spirit's peaceful departure, but also to confirm the grim finality of death in a profound, often disturbing, public performance. This intricate ritual, setting the stage for the lavish public funeral, was the first, and perhaps most defining, aspect of the disturbing rituals of ancient Roman funerals. Having witnessed the chilling prelude of the Death Watch, your involvement in ancient Roman funerary rites now escalated to their grandest and most public display, the funeral procession. Forget quiet dignity. This was an elaborate, often theatrical, spectacle of grief, status, and family history, designed to impress the living and ensure the deceased's enduring influence, making it profoundly disturbing. Imagine the day of the procession. The air in the city is already thick with anticipation, mixed with the pervasive scent of burning incense used to mask the odour of the deceased, especially in warmer climates, for a wealthy or prominent Roman citizen. The Pompa Funebris funeral procession was a meticulously choreographed event, designed to be seen, to be heard, and to convey the immense social standing and influence of the deceased and their surviving family. This wasn't merely a solemn escort to the grave. It was a powerful, public performance. It truly sucked to have your mourning be a public show. The procession would typically begin at the deceased's home in the city, winding its way through the bustling streets of Rome, often through the Forum, and out to the designated burial grounds outside the city walls. The scale and grandeur of the pompa would vary immensely depending on the social status and wealth of the deceased. For a very prominent figure, like a senator or a consul, it could involve hundreds, even thousands, of participants, turning it into a slow, somber parade that captured the attention of the entire city. The participants in the funeral procession were numerous and carefully arranged, each playing a specific role in the public display of grief and status. Musicians and mourners. The procession would be led by musicians playing flutes, horns, and trumpets, often producing a mournful, dirge-like sound that resonated through the streets. Behind them came professional female mourners, pyre, hired for their ability to lament loudly, tear their hair, beat their breasts, and wail dramatically. Their exaggerated displays of grief were a crucial part of the spectacle, designed to amplify the family's sorrow and impress the public with the profound loss. Imagine the piercing wails echoing through the narrow streets, a chilling soundtrack to the procession. Designed to evoke maximum public emotion, it truly sucked to pay people to cry for you. Actors and mimics. This was perhaps one of the most unique and disturbing elements of a wealthy Roman funeral. Professional actors, mimi, would sometimes be hired to walk in the procession, wearing the imagine's wax death mask of the deceased's distinguished ancestors, which we'll explore in Chapter 9. These actors would also don the robes and insignia of the ancestors' former offices, and mimic their gestures and speech. Imagine seeing a parade of actors, their faces grim, embodying generations of your family's powerful deceased relatives, subtly reminding everyone of the lineage and enduring influence of the deceased. This visual tableau of the family's history was a powerful display of aristocratic pride, making the funeral a literal performance of lineage. It truly sucked to have dead relatives perform in your funeral. The deceased's body. The deceased's body, prepared and laid out on the lector's funerary couch during the death watch as explored in Chapter 1, would be the central focus of the procession. For cremation, the body would be borne openly to the pyre. For burial, it would be carried on a bier, often adorned with flowers and symbols of status. The public viewing of the body was crucial, confirming the death and allowing for final farewells. Family and retinue. The immediate family, dressed in simple, often dark or mourning clothes, would follow the body, their grief expected to be visible and profound. Slaves, freedmen, and clients of the deceased would also form part of the procession, demonstrating the deceased's vast network of dependents and supporters. The size of this retinue was a direct indicator of the deceased's social standing and influence, making the procession a powerful display of enduring patronage. The eulogy laudatio funebris for prominent male citizens. A key part of the procession was the delivery of a eulogy in the forum, often from the rostra speaker's platform. A close male relative, often the son, would deliver a speech praising the deceased's virtues, achievements, and contributions to the state and their family. This wasn't just a tribute, it was a powerful piece of political rhetoric, designed to enhance the family's reputation, solidify their standing, and potentially advance the careers of the surviving male relatives, leveraging the death for political gain. Imagine standing by as your father's life was meticulously dissected and praised, every achievement highlighted, every virtue extolled, for the benefit of his living kin. It truly sucked to have your eulogy be a political advertisement. The purpose of the funeral procession was multifaceted, serving both religious and profoundly secular social and political functions, honouring the deceased. It was a solemn act of respect and remembrance, ensuring the deceased was properly sent off to the underworld. Public display of status. The scale, the number of participants, the richness of the attire, the inclusion of imagines, and the prominence of the eulogy, all served to publicly demonstrate the wealth, power, and social standing of the deceased and their family. It was a crucial opportunity for the living to reinforce their own position in Roman society. Social cohesion. The communal mourning and shared ritual helped to reinforce social bonds within the family and the wider community, bringing people together in a shared experience of grief and remembrance. Political statement for aristocratic families. The funeral was a powerful political statement, reminding rivals of their enduring lineage, their past achievements, and their continued influence in Roman public life. It could serve as a platform for rising politicians to demonstrate their oratorical skills and loyalty to family tradition, guidance for the soul from a religious perspective, the proper performance of the rituals, including the procession, was believed to aid the deceased soul in its journey to the underworld, ensuring it found peace and did not return to haunt the living. The legal constraints on funerals, particularly the 12 Tables, Rome's earliest legal code, c. 450 BCE, highlight society's attempt to regulate these potentially excessive displays. These laws aim to limit extravagant spending and overly emotional displays, trying to prevent funerals from becoming too disruptive or financially ruinous. However, wealthy Romans often found ways to circumvent these rules, ensuring their funeral processions remained grand spectacles that reflected their immense status, even in defiance of the law's spirit. Uncommon misconception is that all Roman funerals were uniformly grand public processions. In reality, the scale and display of the pompa funebri varied immensely according to the social status and wealth of the deceased and their family. While wealthy aristocrats might have immense theatrical processions, common citizens and the poor would have much simpler, swifter, and often less public rites, frequently involving immediate burial due to practical and financial constraints. For the lowest classes, particularly slaves, funerals might be incredibly basic or even non-existent, reflecting their lack of social standing even in death. Historians still meticulously study Roman legal texts, entombment, the 12 Tables and later sumptuary laws that attempted to regulate funeral expenses. Roman literary accounts, those from Plutarch's biographies, Livy's histories, or satirical poetry, and archaeological findings from Roman tombs and cemeteries to understand the precise customs, social stratification, and variations in death rituals across different social classes and periods. This research consistently confirms that the grandeur of the funeral was a direct reflection of social status. Furthermore, the physical journey of the procession could be long and arduous, particularly in the Roman summer heat. The slow pace, the crowds, and the general discomfort would be challenging for all participants, especially the elderly or infirm. The combination of solemnity and physical exertion made the procession a demanding event for everyone involved. A public display that demanded endurance from mourners and spectators alike. The psychological impact of witnessing such a grand, yet often morbid, public display would be profound. For the grieving family, it was a public performance of their sorrow, intertwining personal loss with civic duty. For spectators, it was a powerful reminder of mortality, social hierarchy, and the fleeting nature of life, but also an opportunity to witness history and power firsthand. The theatricality, the wailing, the mass of ancestors all contributed to a sensory and emotional overload, leaving a lasting impression. The very streets of Rome, usually bustling with everyday life, were transformed by these processions into temporary stages for a profound ritual about death and lineage. This interruption of daily life, this public declaration of a passing, highlighted the pervasive influence of death rituals on Roman urban existence, making them an unavoidable part of the civic landscape. So, the immediate aftermath of a loved one's passing plunged you into the funeral procession, an elaborate, often theatrical, public display of grief, status, and family history, from professional mourners and actors wearing ancestral masks to solemn eulogies and immense retinues. Every element was designed to impress the living and ensure the deceased's enduring influence. This profound ritual, serving both religious and political functions, was a defining, profoundly disturbing aspect of ancient Roman funerals, transforming personal grief into a public spectacle of power and tradition. Having concluded the grand spectacle of the funeral procession, your participation in ancient Roman funerary rites now culminated in one of its most powerful and terrifying acts, the funeral pyre. Forget a simple cremation. This was a terrifying spectacle of fire, smoke, and profound finality, designed to consume the body in a blaze of offerings and prayers, making it profoundly disturbing. Imagine the designated site for the cremation. For wealthy and prominent Romans, this would often be a specially constructed pyre booster, a large, rectangular structure made of logs, brushwood, and aromatic woods, stacked high. For those with a family tomb or a dedicated burial plot outside the city walls, the pyre might be built near the grave itself. The air would be thick with the anticipation of the flames, mingled with the heavy scents of cypress branches and frankincense, used to mask the inevitable smell of burning flesh. It truly sucked to have your farewell be a giant bonfire. The body of the deceased, now unveiled and prepared as explored in Chapter 1, would be carefully laid upon the pyre. For men, this would often be in their finest toga, perhaps holding a laurel wreath. For women, in their best stola and palla, adorned with jewellery around the body. Immense quantities of grave goods and offerings would be meticulously placed. Personal possessions, clothing, jewellery, ornaments, and other cherished items would be laid out with the deceased, intended to accompany them into the afterlife. Aromatic substances, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and other expensive imported spices would be liberally sprinkled over the body and the pyre. These not only symbolised reverence and purity, but also served a practical purpose to create a vast cloud of fragrant smoke, partially masking the odour of burning flesh. Food and drink, offerings of bread, wine, oil, and sometimes even small portions of meat would be placed on the pyre, intended to provision the deceased for their journey to the underworld. Oil. Olive oil would often be poured over the body and the pyre, acting as an accelerant to ensure a quick and complete burn. Imagine the pyre fully laden, a grim tableau of earthly wealth and mortal remains. Then, the moment of ignition, a close male relative, often the son or husband, would perform the ritual lighting of the pyre with a torch. Flames would quickly leap up, consuming the wood, the offerings, and eventually the body itself. The heat would be intense, radiating outwards, forcing onlookers to keep a respectful distance. It truly sucked to literally go out in a blaze of glory. The spectacle of cremation was terrifying and visceral. You would witness none the roaring fire, a massive blaze, consuming everything in its path, transforming the visible world into a consuming inferno. The heat would be immense, the crackling of the flames deafening, a raw, primal display of destruction. Thick, acrid smoke, despite the aromatic spices. The initial smoke would be heavy, acrid, and pervasive, carrying the unsettling scent of burning flesh and materials. This smoke would fill the air, stinging your eyes and lungs, a constant reminder of the cremation's gruesome reality. The body's transformation. As the flames engulfed the body, it would undergo a horrifying transformation. Flesh would char, fat would sizzle, and organs would burn. The body might writhe or contort in the heat. A chilling display that, while natural for a burning corpse, could be deeply unsettling. Eventually, the body would be reduced to ash and bone fragments, its physical form utterly annihilated by the fire. Imagine seeing the beloved form of your relative being consumed by the flames, reduced to nothing but smoke and ash. A final, irreversible act of destruction. It truly sucked to watch someone burn. Communal mourning alongside the visual horror. The sounds of wailing and lamentation led by professional mourners, as explored in Chapter 7, would accompany the roaring flames, creating a chilling symphony of grief and destruction. Family members would publicly express their sorrow, tearing their hair and rending their garments, their cries mingling with the crackling of the fire. The purpose of cremation in ancient Rome was primarily to purify the body and release the soul for its journey to the underworld. Fire was seen as a purifying agent, swiftly separating the corporeal from the spiritual. The complete consumption of the body was believed to prevent it from lingering as a ghost or returning to haunt the living. For many Romans, it was the preferred method of disposal, ensuring a definitive break between life and death. The entire ritual was designed to emphasize the finality of death and the transition of the soul. The smoke rising to the heavens symbolized the ascent of the spirit. The ashes and bone fragments, meticulously collected, were the only tangible remnants of the deceased, a stark reminder of mortality. One common misconception is that all ancient Romans practiced cremation. While cremation was the predominant funerary practice during the Roman Republic and the early empire, roughly from the 2nd century BCE to the 2nd century CE, burial inhumation gradually became more common from the 2nd century CE onwards, eventually becoming the dominant method by the 4th century CE. The reasons for this shift are complex and debated by historians, involving changing religious beliefs e.g. the rise of Christianity, which preferred burial, philosophical attitudes towards the body, and practical considerations e.g. land availability in large cities. However, during the peak periods, cremation was indeed the most common and elaborate form of disposal for the wealthy. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings from Roman columbaria, underground chambers for urns and cremation sites, as well as Roman legal texts e.g. those governing funerary rites and disposal and literary accounts, those from Pliny the Younger or Cicero describing cremations to understand the precise prevalence, rituals, and changing trends of cremation versus burial in ancient Rome. Furthermore, the collection of the ashes and bone fragments after the pyre had cooled was a meticulous, ritualistic process. Family members, often the closest relatives, would carefully sift through the ashes, collecting any remaining bone fragments, which were then washed with wine and placed into an urna. This was a final, intimate act of care for the deceased, transforming their scattered remains into a portable, venerated object that would be housed in a family tomb. Imagine painstakingly sifting through the charred remains of your loved one, picking out fragments of bone, a grim task that solidified the finality of death. The financial cost of a large funeral pyre, with its immense quantities of wood, aromatic spices, and offerings, was considerable, again highlighting the social stratification of Roman death rituals. Only wealthy families could afford such lavish cremations, ensuring their final send-off was as impressive as their life. For the poor, cremation might be a simpler affair, or direct burial a necessity, reflecting their limited means even in death. The psychological toll of witnessing such a grand, yet violent, display of finality would be immense. The raw power of the flames, the acrid smoke, and the horrifying sight of a body being consumed by fire would leave indelible scars on your psyche. It was a visceral reminder of mortality, the transient nature of life, and the brutal reality of physical destruction. This overwhelming sensory and emotional experience, designed for both reverence and terror, ensured that the funeral pyre was a profound and unforgettable moment in the Roman mourning process, leaving you haunted by the consuming flames of farewell. So, your experience of ancient Roman funerary rites culminated in the funeral pyre, a terrifying spectacle of fire, smoke, and profound finality. The elaborate construction, the vast offerings, and the visceral sight of a body consumed by flames ensured a public and often gruesome end. This intense, ritualistic act of cremation, designed to purify and release the soul, was a defining, profoundly disturbing aspect of ancient Roman funerals, leaving a lasting impression of power, destruction, and awe. Having endured the terrifying spectacle of the funeral pyre, Your participation in ancient Roman funerary rites then led to the final, chilling destination, the grave. Forget universal, pristine cemeteries. The reality of Roman burial practices was diverse, often unsanitary, and frequently overcrowded, making your final resting place, or that of your loved ones, profoundly disturbing. Imagine the journey to your eternal resting place after the cremation. Your collected ashes and bone fragments, meticulously washed and placed in an urn would be transported to the family tomb. If the deceased was inhumed, buried whole, their body, prepared and laid out on a bier, would be carried to the grave. This final journey was often accompanied by a smaller, more intimate procession than the grand pompa funebri, but it was no less significant. It truly sucked to be packed into a niche forever. Roman burial practices varied significantly based on social status, wealth, family tradition, and the prevailing customs of the era. As discussed in Chapter 3, cremation was predominant during the Republic and early Empire, roughly 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE, with inhumation burial becoming more common later, regardless of the method. The final resting place could be grim, columbaria, for many common citizens, particularly freedmen, members of collegia burial societies, or wealthier plebeians. The most common form of burial was in a columbarium. These were large, communal, subterranean tomb houses, often with multiple chambers, resembling dovecotes, hence the name. From columba meaning dove. The walls were lined with thousands of small niches like pigeonholes, each designed to hold an individual urn containing cremated remains. Imagine being placed in a tiny, dark niche alongside thousands of others, your urn sealed behind a small plaque with your name. While this offered a sense of community in death, the sheer density of the deceased, stacked one upon another, could be profoundly claustrophobic and impersonal. The air, even after centuries, would carry the faint, earthy scent of thousands of years of human remains. It truly sucked to be eternally stacked like a book. Individual tombs and mausolea. Wealthy families and aristocrats might construct elaborate individual tombs or mausolea along the major roads outside the city walls as required by Roman law, which forbade burial within the pomerium, the sacred boundary of Rome, primarily for religious and public health reasons. These range from simple, decorated chambers to monumental, multi-story structures. While these offered more space and privacy, and were often adorned with frescoes, sculptures and inscriptions celebrating the deceased, they still housed numerous family members. Imagine sharing your eternal resting place with dozens of your ancestors, some of whom you might never have known, their sarcophagi or urns occupying every available space. Catacombs. For early Christians and Jews, particularly from the 2nd to 5th century CE, underground catacombs became common burial sites. These were vast, labyrinthine networks of narrow tunnels, carved into soft rock, with thousands of individual burial niches locally stacked vertically along the walls. While initially providing a sense of community and religious solidarity, these spaces were incredibly cramped, dark, and often humid. Imagine your body being placed into a small, dark recess in a vast underground maze, sealed shut with a tile or slab, surrounded by countless other anonymous dead. The air would be heavy, with the pervasive smell of damp earth and confined decay. It truly sucked to be buried in a dark, underground maze. Communal graves, pits particuli for the very poor, slaves, and those who died without family or means. Burial was often in communal graves or large pits particuli in Rome, meaning little wells. These were essentially mass burial sites, often located outside the city walls. Bodies, sometimes unceremoniously dumped, would be interred in layers, reflecting a lack of dignity and individualized care in death. This was the grim reality for the vast majority of Rome's common populace, Imagine your body, or that of a loved one, being thrown into a communal pit, unceremoniously, alongside dozens of other anonymous corpses, your final resting place a forgotten common grave. It truly sucked to be buried like garbage. Overcrowding was a pervasive issue in Roman necropolises, with millions of people living in and around Rome over centuries. Burial space became a precious commodity. Cemeteries outside the city walls, and particularly columbaria and catacombs, became incredibly dense, with thousands of burials packed tightly together. This density, while a testament to the sheer population, also contributed to unsanitary conditions and a sense of anonymous, impersonal burial. Lack of sanitation and hygiene was a constant concern. While Romans were renowned for their public baths and aqueducts, their understanding of decomposition and contagion was limited. Burial sites, particularly mass graves or those near populated areas, could pose health risks due to the presence of decaying bodies and the potential for ground contamination. The pervasive smell of decay, even if mitigated by incense during burial, would linger, particularly in poorly ventilated subterranean tombs. It truly sucked to be perpetually surrounded by decaying bodies, even in death. Desecration and tomb robbery was a constant threat. The very wealth contained within elite tombs is explored in The Disturbing World of Curses and Black Magic in Ancient Rome. Chapter 4 regarding burial places for depictions made them irresistible targets for robbers. Even humble burials might be disturbed for their meagre grave goods. The fear that your eternal rest would be violated, your remains scattered, and your possessions plundered was a profound source of anxiety for the living family, a constant worry that the sanctity of death might not be honoured. This constant threat underscored the precariousness of even your final resting place. The cost of burial also reflected profound social stratification. While the state sometimes provided basic burial for the very poor, a dignified, formal burial was a significant expense for common citizens. Participation in burial clubs, collegia funeratitia, was crucial. These societies would pool resources to ensure members received a proper burial and sometimes a niche in a columbarium for the wealthy. Elaborate tombs and ceremonies could be astronomically expensive, reflecting their status even in death. This financial burden meant that the quality and security of your final resting place directly reflected your wealth in life. One common misconception is that all ancient Roman burials were highly elaborate and involved grand sarcophagi. In reality, while magnificent sarcophagi and monumental tombs existed, especially for the very elite, the vast majority of Romans, particularly the common citizens and the poor, received much simpler and often less permanent burials, primarily in columbaria for cremated remains or simple graves. The elaborate burials often seen in museums are the exceptions, not the rule. The shift from cremation to inhumation over the centuries from roughly the 2nd century CE onwards also led to a diversification of burial types, but the underlying issue of managing a large number of deceased remained. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings from various Roman necropolises, cemeteries and catacombs, funerary inscriptions, epitaphs, and legal texts, the 12 tables and later imperial decrees on burial practices to understand the precise customs, social stratification, and diverse realities of Roman burial practices, confirming their varied and often utilitarian nature. Furthermore, the psychological impact of being interred in such confined, anonymous, and densely packed spaces could be profound. The thought of eternal confinement in a small niche, surrounded by countless other deceased individuals, their ashes or bodies slowly decaying, was a chilling contemplation for the living. Visiting these crowded necropolises, filled with the tangible evidence of mortality and the grim realities of mass burial, served as a constant reminder of their own inevitable end and the limitations of their earthly existence. The practice of communal burial in columbaria or catacombs, while offering a form of spiritual community in death, also meant that your individuality was subsumed into a larger collective. Your small niche, your simple inscription, was one among thousands, highlighting your anonymity in the vastness of the afterlife. This contrast between the grandeur of Roman society and the often humble and impersonal reality of death was stark. The very concept of a family tomb, while providing a sense of continuity, was also challenged by the sheer number of deceased over generations. Many tombs became incredibly crowded, with new burials constantly being added, reflecting the practical pressures of limited space even for the privileged. This continuous use of burial sites, sometimes for centuries, meant that death was not a static event, but an ongoing process of intergenerational internment, constantly reminding the living of their own mortality. So, your experience of ancient Roman funerary rites culminated in the grave, a diverse and often unsanitary reality, from crowded columbaria and sprawling necropolises to vast, anonymous communal pits. Your final resting place was a testament to both social stratification and the limitations of ancient sanitation. This profound and often impersonal interment, constantly under threat from overcrowding and desecration, was a defining, profoundly disturbing aspect of ancient Roman funerals, ensuring that even in death, your peace was elusive, and your final rest often lacked dignity, even as your urn rested or your body decayed in its tomb. Your departure from the living world initiated a profound and constant obligation for your surviving family of the ancestor cult. Forget true rest. Your spirit, if not properly venerated, could become a source of profound fear, demanding constant offerings and meticulous rituals to avoid its wrath, making your post-mortem influence profoundly disturbing. Imagine your journey into the underworld, Orcus, or the realm of Pluto and Proserpina, a murky, shadowy place where the spirits of the dead resided. For you, the deceased, your fate depended heavily on the proper performance of funerary rites and, crucially, the ongoing veneration by your living descendants. In ancient Roman belief, the boundary between the living and the dead was permeable, and the spirits of the ancestors, particularly the mains, the deified spirits of the benevolent dead within a family, remained intimately connected to their living kin, demanding respect and sustenance. It truly sucked to be eternally dependent on your grandkids. The ancestor cult was a central pillar of Roman family life, familia, and religion pietas. It was a continuous, lifelong obligation for the living to honour, remember, and care for their deceased ancestors, ensuring their spirits remain peaceful, benevolent, and protective. If the ancestors were neglected, if their rites were forgotten, or if their spirits were somehow offended, they could become malevolent ghosts, larvae, or lemures, haunting the living, bringing misfortune, illness, or even death to their family and community. This fear of angered or restless spirits ensured meticulous adherence to every ritual, however strange. As a vital act of self-preservation for the living, it truly sucked to be haunted by your own family. The veneration of ancestors involved various rituals and offerings, performed regularly and meticulously by your living descendants, particularly by the head of the family. The pater familias, communal feasts parentalia. The most prominent annual festival of the dead was the parentalia, celebrated for 9 days in February. During this time, families would visit the tombs of their ancestors, bringing offerings of food, wine, milk, honey, and olive oil. Imagine your living family arriving at your tomb, cleaning your grave, then pouring libations, liquid offerings onto the earth or directly into the tomb through small pipes or openings. For inhumed burials, food, often humble like bread, salt, and grain, would be left, a symbolic meal shared with your spirit, This communal feast, often solemn but sometimes convivial, reinforced the bonds between the living and the dead. Daily offerings beyond major festivals. Individual families might make daily or weekly offerings at the household shrine lararium, where images or busts of ancestors, the Imagians, which we'll discuss in Chapter 9, were kept. Small portions of food, libations of wine, and incense might be offered, accompanied by prayers for protection and prosperity. Maintaining the tomb. The physical upkeep of your tomb or niche in the columbarium was crucial. Your descendants were responsible for keeping your burial place clean, clear of vegetation, and in good repair. A neglected tomb was a sign of disrespect, potentially angering your spirit and bringing ill fortune upon your family. Imagine your descendants diligently tending your tomb, knowing that their own well-being depended on your peaceful rest. Ritualistic prayers and invocations. Your descendants would offer specific prayers, invoking your name and praising your virtues, ensuring your memory remained alive and your spirit was well disposed towards them. They would seek your guidance, your protection, and your blessings for their endeavours. The purpose of the ancestor cult was multifaceted, serving both religious and profoundly secular social functions, ensuring spiritual peace. It was believed that proper veneration ensured your spirit, as the minds remained peaceful and benevolent in the underworld, and did not return to haunt the living as a malevolent ghost, larva, or lemur. The fear of these restless, angry spirits, those who died tragically, unjustly, or were not properly buried or venerated, was pervasive, leading to strict adherence to ancestor cult rituals, maintaining family continuity and identity. The ancestor cult was central to the Roman concept of familia and Jinsclan. By venerating the dead, the living reinforced their lineage, their family identity, and their shared heritage. Your memory, your accomplishments, and your virtues were passed down through generations, making you an enduring presence in the family's life. Social status and prestige for aristocratic families. An elaborate ancestor cult, with impressive tombs and a long lineage of distinguished ancestors whose imagines were displayed, was a powerful public display of their social standing, their dignitas, dignity, and their continuing influence in Roman society. It reinforced their aristocratic claims and their connection to Rome's glorious past. Protection and prosperity. It was believed that benevolent ancestral spirits would protect the living family from harm, bring good fortune, and ensure the prosperity of the oikos. Neglecting them could lead to crop failure, illness, or financial ruin. Your peace in the afterlife was linked to your descendants' prosperity in life. The cost of maintaining the ancestor cult could be significant, particularly for wealthy families with numerous deceased members. This involved not just the initial expense of elaborate tombs, but ongoing costs for offerings, maintenance, and periodic feasts. This financial burden was a testament to the depth of their belief and their commitment to their lineage, ensuring that the legacy of death continued to exact its toll on the living. One common misconception is that the Roman ancestor cult was solely about simple veneration of individual family members. In reality, it was deeply intertwined with the Roman concept of citizenship, social status, and the political power of aristocratic families for the elite. Ancestor worship was a crucial mechanism for maintaining and displaying their nobilitas, nobility, and their claim to leadership, demonstrating a long line of distinguished ancestors who had served Rome. Their funerary rituals, including the ancestor cult, were meticulously designed to reinforce this political and social hierarchy. Historians still meticulously study Roman legal texts, g. concerning inheritance and funerary rites, funerary inscriptions, epitaphs that list ancestors and their achievements, archaeological findings of Roman tombs and family shrines, larariia, and Roman literary accounts, Plutarch's biographies, Cicero's speeches to understand the precise customs, social stratification, and political functions of the ancestor cult in ancient Rome, consistently confirming its pervasive and multifaceted role. Furthermore, the fear of malevolent spirits, the larvae or lemurs, restless spirits of those who died violently, unjustly, or were improperly buried, venerated, was a pervasive anxiety. If your ancestor cult was neglected, your spirit might join these tormented ghosts, bringing misfortune upon your descendants. This fear ensured meticulous adherence to all rituals, however strange, as a vital act of self-preservation for the living, highlighting the constant, underlying dread that permeated Roman life, linking every misfortune to a potential spiritual transgression. The absence of a male heir, who was traditionally responsible for performing the ancestral rites, was a terrifying prospect, as it meant the potential extinction of the ancestral cult and the spiritual abandonment of the deceased. This emphasized the paramount importance of male lineage in Roman society, even for the well-being of the dead. Your eternal peace literally depended on your son. The psychological toll on the living family, perpetually tasked with honouring and appeasing their deceased ancestors, would be immense. They lived with a constant awareness of their connection to the dead, their actions subtly guided by the fear of divine or ancestral displeasure. This pervasive belief, while offering a sense of continuity and protection, also added a layer of constant anxiety and obligation to their daily lives, ensuring that death was not a finality, but a perpetual presence that demanded constant attention and ritual. Their lives were consumed by caring for the dead, a never-ending cycle of reverence and subtle fear. The periodic festivals of the dead, like the Parentalia in February, would bring the community into direct contact with the necropolises. These solemn occasions, where families gathered at tombs, sharing food and memories, served as a communal reminder of mortality and the enduring influence of the ancestors. This public aspect of the ancestor cult reinforced its importance and its role in shaping social identity. So, your departure from the living world initiated a profound and constant obligation for your surviving family, the ancestor cult. This pervasive belief in ancestral spirits, demanding constant veneration and meticulous offerings to avoid their wrath, ensured your posthumous influence, but also burdened the living with perpetual fear and elaborate rituals. This enduring connection between the living and the dead, a dynamic of care and subtle dread, was a defining, profoundly disturbing aspect of ancient Roman funerals. Even as your spirit lingered, demanding veneration from your living descendants, and your tomb lay silent, a profound and brutal spectacle often unfolded in your honour, gladiatorial games. Forget dignified farewells. Elite Roman funerals sometimes included terrifying, often fatal, combat staged as a human sacrifice, ensuring glory for the deceased at an immense human cost, making these rituals profoundly disturbing. Imagine the scene just outside your grand tomb, or in a temporary arena erected for the occasion. The sounds of mourning might still linger, mingled now with the excited roar of a crowd and the clanging of weapons. These were not the massive, public games of the Colosseum staged by emperors, though they shared a brutal origin. These were private gladiatorial contests munera, staged by wealthy Roman families, particularly prominent aristocratic gente clans, as a crucial part of their funerary rites. This wasn't merely entertainment, it was a deeply symbolic act, steeped in ancient tradition, a human sacrifice intended to honour the deceased. It truly sucked to have your funeral be a blood sport. The origins of gladiatorial combat itself are believed to lie in these ancient funerary practices, particularly among the Etruscans and ancient civilization in Italy and early Romans. The earliest recorded gladiatorial combat in Rome occurred in 264 BCE, when the sons of Decimus Junius Brutus Pyre staged a munus involving 3 pairs of gladiators in the Forum Boreum cattle market to honour their deceased father. This practice evolved over centuries, growing in scale and complexity, eventually becoming the grand public spectacles of the Republican Empire. However, the underlying purpose to honour the dead through a ritualistic shedding of blood persisted even as the games became more about public entertainment and political display. Your funeral, in this context, was a direct link to these ancient, violent roots. The combatants in these funerary munera were typically slaves, often those captured in war or condemned for serious crimes, or condemned criminals, damnati ad mortem or damnati ad ludum. These men were forced to fight, often to the death, to honour the deceased. They had no choice in their participation. Their lives were forfeit to the spectacle. Imagine watching men, just like you, forced to fight, knowing that their lives were being extinguished not for conquest or glory, but for the spiritual benefit of a dead man. This direct, brutal commodification of human life for funerary purposes was a profound degradation. It truly sucked to have your mourning involve slavery and death. The nature of the combat was profoundly brutal. These were not always fair fights. Combatants might be unevenly matched in skill, or some might be deliberately under-equipped, ensuring a quick and bloody end. Weapons would be real, sharpened for lethal effect. The combat would be fierce, agonizing, and often short, designed to provide a visceral shedding of blood. The crowd, often the deceased's clients, freedmen, and even ordinary citizens, would gather to witness the spectacle, their cheers and shouts echoing over the temporary arena. Their presence legitimized the brutality, turning human suffering into a display of honour for the deceased. The shedding of blood was a crucial element of the ritual. It was believed that the blood of the fallen gladiators somehow purified the deceased, honoured their spirit, or provided a form of vital energy that aided their journey to the underworld. This grisly belief that one's final peace or glory could be bought with the violent deaths of others underscored the pervasive brutality hidden beneath the veneer of Roman civilization. Your life, as a gladiator, was literally a sacrifice for someone else's afterlife. The scale of these funerary games could be immense, particularly for very prominent figures, while nowhere near the scale of imperial games in the Colosseum. Some aristocratic families would stage munera involving dozens, sometimes even hundreds, of gladiators fighting over several days, incurring immense financial cost. This extravagance served a dual purpose, honouring the deceased lavishly and publicly displaying the wealth, power, and enduring influence of the surviving family. The more spectacular and bloody the games, the greater the honour bestowed upon the dead, and the more prestigious the surviving family appeared. It truly sucked to have your relative's funeral be a blood circus. The choice of specific gladiatorial types, the pairing of opponents, and the sequence of fights could also be meticulously planned by the family or their lanista gladiatorial school owner to create dramatic narratives and ensure maximum entertainment value. The games were a carefully choreographed performance of violence, designed to resonate with the Roman public's appetite for spectacle. One common misconception is that all gladiatorial games were held in massive amphitheatres like the Colosseum for public entertainment. In reality, while imperial games became the most famous, the original form of gladiatorial combat, the munus, plural, munera, was initially a private affair, staged by wealthy individuals to honour their deceased ancestors as part of their funerals. These private munera continued to be staged in various forms, usually in the temporary wooden arenas or the forum even after imperial games became widespread, highlighting their distinct ritualistic origins and purpose. The Colosseum itself was built relatively late in Rome's history. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings of Roman tombs and funerary reliefs depicting gladiatorial scenes. Roman legal texts E.G. concerning munera regulations and literary accounts G. Livy, Cicero. Valerius Maximus detailing early gladiatorial games to understand the precise origins, ritualistic purposes, and evolving forms of funerary munera, confirming their pervasive and often brutal role in Roman death rituals. Furthermore, the psychological impact on the family witnessing these brutal spectacles, supposedly in honour of their loved one, would be complex. While driven by piety and a desire to honour the dead, the raw violence, the screams of the dying and the flow of blood would be deeply unsettling. The grim reality of human lives being sacrificed for ritualistic purposes would underscore the harsh realities of Roman power and their peculiar beliefs about the afterlife. Yet, they endured, believing it was necessary for the deceased's eternal peace. The financial burden of staging a gladiatorial munus was immense. Even for the wealthiest families, it involved the cost of acquiring, training, housing, and then sacrificing valuable gladiators, as well as the expenses for the temporary arena, the professional lanistae, and the necessary support staff. This immense expenditure was a public display of wealth and dignitas, dignity, a crucial way for aristocratic families to reinforce their social and political standing in the eyes of Rome, even through death. Your family's reputation was literally bought with blood. The moral ambiguity of these games was evident even in ancient times, while accepted by many. Some Roman philosophers and moralists like Seneca expressed critiques of the extreme violence and the treatment of gladiators as mere instruments of entertainment, raising questions about the ethics of such rituals. This suggests that the inherent brutality was not universally embraced without question, even within Roman society. The gladiators themselves, whether slaves or condemned criminals, faced a profound irony. Their lives were consumed by brutal training as explored in The Brutal Truth About Gladiator Training Camps. Their bodies were meticulously prepared and patched up as explored in The Horrifying Job of Being a Doctor for Roman Gladiators. And their ultimate purpose, in a funerary munus, was to die violently, not for military glory, but to enhance the posthumous prestige of a stranger. Their suffering was a direct, literal offering, an anonymous sacrifice for someone else's eternal honour. So, your experience of ancient Roman funerary rites was profoundly disturbing, because they often included gladiatorial games, these brutal, often fatal, contests, staged as a human sacrifice to honour the deceased, transform mourning into a spectacle of violence. This chilling blend of blood, honour, and human exploitation, ensuring glory for the dead at the cost of living lives, was a defining, profoundly unsettling aspect of ancient Roman funerals, directly linking personal remembrance to pervasive brutality. Even as your fallen relative was honoured with brutal gladiatorial games, your duty as a Roman mourner demanded a very specific, and often performative, display of sorrow. Forget private tears. Mourning rituals involve public wailing, elaborate weeping, and sometimes hired grief, designed to express social status as much as genuine sorrow, making them profoundly disturbing. Imagine the pervasive atmosphere of grief that hung over a prominent Roman household immediately following a death, while genuine sorrow was undoubtedly felt. The expression of that grief was meticulously ritualized and often took on a theatrical quality, particularly for wealthy and aristocratic families. Your role as a living family member was to contribute to this public display, ensuring that the deceased's status and your family's adherence to tradition were visibly acknowledged. It truly sucked to be forced to perform your own grief. The wailing and lamentation ululatus began immediately upon death as explored in Chapter 1. This wasn't merely a spontaneous outburst, it was a deliberate, loud, and often prolonged vocalization of sorrow, primarily performed by female family members. Your voice, along with those of your mother, sisters and aunts, would join in a piercing chorus of cries, lamenting the deceased's passing. This public display of profound grief was a crucial aspect of Roman mourning, ensuring the entire community was aware of the family's loss and the high status of the deceased. Imagine forcing your voice to produce piercing wails, even when your throat was raw, knowing that the louder you cried, the more respect was shown. It truly sucked to have your sadness be a performance. To amplify this public demonstration of sorrow, wealthy families often hired professional female mourners priefike. These women, skilled in the art of lamentation, would lead the wailing, tearing their hair, beating their breasts, and sometimes even scratching their faces to draw blood, all to heighten the emotional intensity of the display. They would accompany the funeral procession as explored in Chapter 2, ensuring that the sounds of profound grief resonated through the streets, impressing upon the public the magnitude of the family's loss. Imagine being a grieving family member, surrounded by strangers performing exaggerated sorrow, their wails blending with your own genuine tears, creating a cacophony of both real and feigned grief. This blending of authentic sorrow with professional performance was a unique and often disturbing aspect of Roman mourning. The rending of garments and tearing of hair were common visual expressions of grief. Female mourners, both family and professional, would visibly tear their clothes, often simple, dark tunics adopted for mourning, and pull at their hair, sometimes even cutting it short, as a sign of profound distress. This physical display of sorrow was not just symbolic, it was a visceral act of self-mortification, designed to convey the depth of grief to the public. Adding a visual element of chaos and despair to the procession and the period of mourning, it truly sucked to literally tear your hair out in grief. The duration of mourning was also prescribed by social custom and sometimes by law, reflecting the deceased's status and the family's wealth. For a prominent figure, the official mourning period could last for days or weeks, during which the family would refrain from public entertainment, wear dark clothes, and observe various restrictions. This protracted display of sorrow served as a continuous public acknowledgement of the family's loss and their adherence to tradition. Imagine being expected to visibly grieve for weeks on end, suppressing any moments of respite or peace, knowing that public scrutiny demanded a constant display of sorrow. The purpose of these mourning rituals was multifaceted, blending genuine emotion with social and religious functions, expressing grief, while performative. These rituals provided a socially acceptable outlet for intense grief, allowing family members to express their profound sorrow in a public, communal way, honouring the deceased. The intensity and scale of the lamentation directly reflected the deceased's importance and the family's respect for them, ensuring they received a proper send-off into the afterlife. Displaying social status for wealthy and aristocratic families, the number of professional mourners, the extravagance of their lamentations, and the public visibility of their grief were all crucial elements in displaying their social standing and their adherence to elite customs. A grand funeral, complete with professional mourners, reinforced the family's dignitas, dignity, and gravitas, seriousness in the eyes of Roman society. Spiritual guidance. The loud cries and rituals were also believed to aid the deceased soul in its transition to the underworld, guiding it and ensuring it did not linger as a restless, malevolent spirit larvae or lemures. The collective wailing was a form of spiritual assistance, ensuring the peace of the dead. The use of professional mourners known as priefike in particular highlights the performative aspect. These were hired women, trained to cry and lament loudly, ensuring the required level of public grief was maintained, even if the family's private sorrow was more subdued or simply exhausted. Their presence ensured the spectacle was always on, regardless of the genuine emotions of the moment. This ritualization of emotion, while culturally accepted, stands in stark contrast to modern, more private forms of grieving. One common misconception is that all ancient Roman displays of grief were purely authentic and spontaneous. In reality, While genuine sorrow certainly existed, the public expression of grief, especially among the elite, was often highly ritualized and performative, with specific customs and even hired professionals to ensure the proper demonstration of sorrow and status. The Roman emphasis on public display, pomp extended even to mourning, where the way one grieved reflected one's social standing. Historians still meticulously study Roman legal texts, e.g., sumptuary laws that attempted to regulate funeral expenses and mourning displays, Roman literary accounts, e.g., Plutarch's biographies, Livy's histories, satirical poetry by Juvenal or Martial that sometimes mocked excessive mourning, and archaeological findings of funerary monuments which depict scenes of lamentation to understand the precise customs, social stratification, and sincerity of mourning rituals in ancient Rome. Furthermore, the emotional toll on the actual family members, particularly women, who were expected to lead and sustain these public, performative displays of grief, would be immense. You were forced to amplify your sorrow, to outwardly express raw anguish, even when your body was exhausted, your voice raw, and your spirit drained. This constant demand for emotional performance, this public display of your deepest pain, could hinder your personal grieving process, leaving you with a sense of being perpetually on and unable to truly process your loss in private. Your personal sorrow became a public resource for validating status. The physical toll was also significant. The constant wailing could lead to throat strain and headaches. The tearing of hair or scratching of faces could result in physical injuries. The emotional and physical exhaustion from prolonged. Intense mourning rituals would leave you utterly depleted, exacerbating any underlying illnesses or vulnerabilities, particularly if you were already frail. The social pressure to conform was intense. Any perceived lack of sufficient grief, any failure to perform the rituals properly, could bring shame upon your family and suggest a lack of respect for the deceased. This societal scrutiny ensured that all family members, regardless of their private feelings, adhered to the public dictates of mourning, turning personal grief into a mandatory social obligation. So, your experience of ancient Roman funerary rites included intense mourning rituals, characterized by public wailing, elaborate weeping, and often the hiring of professional mourners. This meticulously choreographed performance of sorrow, designed to express social status and piety as much as genuine grief, was a defining, profoundly disturbing aspect of ancient Roman funerals, turning personal loss into a grand, public spectacle that exhausted both body and soul. Even as you participated in performative mourning rituals and paid your respects at the grand funeral pyre, the Roman approach to death extended into a more profound and chilling family practice, the feast of the dead, forget solemn, quiet remembrance. These were communal meals held at gravesites, blurring the lines between celebration and grim remembrance, making these rituals profoundly disturbing. Imagine the scene at your family tomb or columbarium, typically located along the major roads outside the city walls. This wasn't a one-time visit. Roman families would regularly gather at their ancestral burial grounds, not just for somber prayers, but to partake in communal meals, sine novendiales. These feasts, often held on specific days after the funeral like the novendialia, the 9th day after death, marking the end of the main mourning period, or on annual festivals for the dead parentalia in February. Rosalia in May were designed to re-establish the connection between the living and the dead, ensuring the deceased's peaceful transition and the family's continued prosperity. It truly sucked to have dinner with dead people. The act of dining at the grave was deeply symbolic. It reinforced the belief that the deceased, though departed, remained a part of the family, sharing a meal with their living kin. Your family would bring various offerings of food and drink to the tomb. These typically included simple foods: bread, salt, eggs, lentils, or a small portion of grain. Wine and oil libations of wine and olive oil would be poured onto the ground or directly into the tomb through small pipes or openings for inhumed burials, reaching the actual remains. This act was believed to nourish the deceased spirit, ensuring their continued well-being in the underworld. More elaborate meals for wealthier families. The feast could be quite substantial, involving various dishes prepared and consumed at the gravesite, often in dedicated dining areas or triclinia built into the tomb complex itself. Imagine sitting down on benches or reclining on mats set up around the tomb, sharing a meal with your living relatives, while implicitly acknowledging the unseen presence of your deceased loved ones. The air would carry the sense of the food you ate, mingled with the faint, earthy smell of the tomb, and perhaps the lingering aroma of incense burned during prayers. This blurring of the mundane act of eating with the sacred act of ancestor veneration created a unique and often unsettling atmosphere. The purpose of these feasts was multifaceted, serving both religious and profoundly social functions, nourishing the dead. Romanians believe that the deceased spirit, particularly the minds, the deified spirits of the benevolent dead within a family, needed sustenance to continue its existence in the underworld. The food and drink offerings were direct provisions for their journey and their eternal comfort. Maintaining connection. Sharing a meal was a fundamental act of social bonding in Roman society. By feasting at the grave, the living reinforced their continuous connection to the deceased, ensuring they remained part of the family unit, even beyond the grave. It was a way to keep the deceased alive in memory and in spirit. Appeasing the spirit's proper veneration, including these feasts, was believed to ensure that the manes remained peaceful and benevolent, acting as protective spirits for the living family. Neglecting the ancestor cult, or failing to provide proper offerings, could lead to the spirits becoming malevolent ghosts, larvae or lemurs, haunting the living and bringing misfortune, illness, or even death. This fear of angered or restless spirits added a profound layer of anxiety to every feast. It truly sucked to be haunted if you forgot the snacks. Displaying status for aristocratic families. The grandeur of the tomb, the lavishness of the offerings, and the scale of the feast were all crucial elements in publicly displaying their wealth, their adherence to tradition, and their enduring social standing dignitas in Roman society. It was a visible reminder of their lineage and their continued influence, even in death. This blend of piety and ostentation was a hallmark of elite Roman funerals. Social cohesion. The communal nature of these feasts, bringing together extended family, freedmen, and clients, helped to reinforce social bonds within the familia and gens clan, reminding everyone of their shared heritage and mutual obligations. It was a powerful way to re-establish order and continuity after the disruption of a death. The presence of the very bones or ashes of the deceased, housed in urns or sarcophagi just feet away from where you ate, created a constant, visceral reminder of mortality. You were literally dining in a tomb, sharing a space with the dead. This intimate proximity to human remains, while accepted as part of their funerary customs, would certainly be unsettling by modern standards, blurring the lines between life and death in a profoundly tactile way. One common misconception is that all Roman funerals and afterlife rituals were purely somber and mournful. In reality, while grief was certainly present, Roman death rituals, particularly the ancestor cult and the feasts of the dead, also incorporated elements of celebration, social display, and conviviality. The focus was not just on lamentation, but also on affirming the continuity of the family and the ongoing presence of the deceased spirit. The blending of feasting with the dead highlights a complex cultural attitude towards mortality that combined reverence with a pragmatic approach to maintaining social order and family cohesion. Historians still meticulously study Roman legal texts, sumptuary laws that regulated funeral feasts, funerary inscriptions, epitaphs that sometimes invited passers-by to share a meal or make offerings, archaeological findings from Roman tombs, built-in triclinia, cooking areas, and remnants of food offerings and Roman literary accounts, those by Juvenal or Martial, satirizing funerary feasts, or Cicero's discussions on ancestral veneration to understand the precise customs, social stratification, and symbolic meanings of funerary feasts in ancient Rome, consistently confirming their pervasive and multifaceted role. Furthermore, the duration of some of these feasts could be considerable, stretching for hours, often from dusk into the night, as family members engaged in conversation, shared memories of the deceased, and fulfilled their ritualistic obligations. This protracted engagement with the dead, through shared meals and ongoing conversation, created a unique bond that transcended the physical boundaries of life and death. The psychological impact of constantly sharing meals with your deceased ancestors, of believing their spirits were present and demanding veneration, would be immense. You would live with a constant awareness of their influence, your actions subtly guided by the fear of displeasing them or the hope of securing their benevolent protection. This pervasive belief, while offering a sense of continuity and comfort, also added a layer of constant anxiety and obligation to your daily life, ensuring that death was not a finality, but a perpetual presence that demanded constant attention and ritual. Your very meals became a spiritual transaction, your sustenance tied to the well-being of the dead. The economic implications of these feasts, especially for large wealthy families, were considerable. They involved expenses for food, wine, and ongoing maintenance of the tomb, further highlighting the intersection of piety, social status, and financial burden in Roman death rituals. The dedication of resources to the dead was a constant reminder of the enduring power of family lineage and the pervasive belief in the afterlife. The location of the tombs outside the city walls also meant that these feasts often took place in necropolises, vast sprawling cemeteries that were effectively cities of the dead. These areas, while sacred, could also be isolated or eerie, especially at night, adding another layer of unsettling atmosphere to the communal meals. You were literally dining on the outskirts of the world, surrounded by monuments to mortality. So, your experience of ancient Roman funerary rites included the Feast of the Dead, communal meals held at grave sites that profoundly blurred the lines between celebration and solemn remembrance. These disturbing rituals, involving offerings of food and wine to the deceased and a pervasive fear of angered spirits, were a defining, profoundly disturbing aspect of ancient Roman funerals, ensuring that your connection to the departed was maintained through constant ritual and fear. Even after death, even as your family honoured you with grave feasts and worried about restless spirits, your enduring legacy was inextricably linked to one of the most powerful and distinctive elements of Roman aristocratic life, the imagines. Forget painted portraits or simple busts. These eerie, lifelike wax masks of your ancestors were a chilling reminder of the deceased's enduring family influence and a constant, public display of power, making your presence in the afterlife profoundly disturbing. Imagine the atrium, the main reception hall of your aristocratic family's home in Rome. This was the heart of the familia, the space where clients would gather and where your family's history was visibly displayed. Here, in prominent niches along the walls, would hang dozens, perhaps hundreds, of these imagines plural, singular imago. These were not merely artistic representations, they were wax death masks, meticulously moulded directly from the face of a distinguished male ancestor shortly after his death. Each imago was then painted with lifelike colours and dressed in the actual robes and insignia of the ancestor's highest office, a consul's toga praetexta, a general's military cloak. It truly sucked to have your dead relatives stare at you, perpetually. The purpose of the imagines was deeply profound and profoundly Roman. Ancestral veneration. They served as tangible, revered representations of your deceased ancestors, allowing for continuous veneration within the home. Your family would offer prayers, libations, and sacrifices to these masks, honouring their spirits and seeking their continued protection and blessing for the living lineage. They were believed to maintain a direct spiritual link between the living and the dead members of the Jin's clan. Public display of nobilitas for aristocratic families. The imagines were the ultimate display of their nobilitas, nobility and their claim to leadership in the Roman Republic and Empire, to have a long line of distinguished ancestors, men who had held high offices like consulship or censorship, and whose faces gazed down from the atrium walls, was the most powerful visual testament to your family's enduring prestige and influence. Each mask was a silent, yet powerful, political statement, reminding every visitor of your family's deep roots in Roman history and its accumulated honour. Imagine inviting a political rival to your home, forcing him to conduct business under the unblinking gaze of your entire illustrious ancestry. A chilling psychological display of inherited power. It truly sucked to be eternally used for family bragging rights, education, and inspiration. For younger generations, the imagines served as a constant reminder of their family's glorious past and a powerful inspiration to emulate their ancestors' achievements. Boys would grow up surrounded by these figures, learning about their family's contributions to Rome and internalizing the pressure to uphold the dignitas, dignity and gravitas seriousness of their lineage. Funeral processions. As we discussed in Chapter 2, the imagines played a crucial and disturbing role in elite funeral processions, pompa funebri, professional actors mimi, carefully chosen for their physical resemblance to the deceased ancestors, would wear these wax masks and don the ancestors' actual robes and insignia. They would then march in the procession, mimicking the gestures and speech patterns of the revered dead. Imagine seeing a literal parade of your family's deceased patriarchs, resurrected by actors and masks, walking alongside your loved one's bier. This was a powerful, theatrical reenactment of family history, a vivid reminder to the public of the lineage and enduring influence of the deceased clan. It truly sucked to have your dead relatives perform in your funeral. The creation of the imagines was itself a meticulous and somewhat gruesome process. Directly after death, a mould would be taken of the deceased's face, capturing their features in remarkable detail. From this mould, a wax mask would be cast, then carefully painted with lifelike colours, capturing the skin tone, eye colour, and even any wrinkles or distinguishing marks of the deceased. This ensured an eerie resemblance, a chillingly lifelike representation of the dead. This blend of artistry and direct contact with death was a unique aspect of Roman funerary customs. The preservation of the imagines was a continuous effort. Wax is a fragile material, susceptible to heat, dust, and insects. Special care would be taken to protect these ancestral masks, ensuring they endured for generations, meticulously maintained as the tangible embodiment of the family's history. This upkeep reflected the ongoing importance of the ancestor cult and the family's dedication to its lineage. The presence of the imagines highlights the Roman obsession with fama, fame, and reputation, and glory, not just in life, but in death and through their descendants. A Roman aristocrat sought not only personal achievement, but also to contribute to the cumulative glory of his family, ensuring his own imago would one day join the esteemed collection in the atrium, serving as inspiration and a subtle form of control over future generations. This constant gaze from the ancestors served as a powerful psychological motivator, pushing living family members to uphold the family honour and achieve greatness. It truly sucked to be judged by your dead relatives, all the time. One common misconception is that imagines were simply artistic busts or portraits, like those found in later periods. While marble busts and bronze portraits were indeed common for Roman elites, the wax death mask imagines were a distinct and much older tradition, unique to aristocratic families and rooted in ancient Roman religious and social practices. The direct moulding from the deceased's face and their specific role in funeral processions set them apart from more generalized portraiture. Furthermore, the privilege of having imagines was initially restricted to those who had held curule magistracies, the highest offices in the Republic, highlighting their elite and symbolic nature. Historians still meticulously study Roman literary accounts, e.g. Pliny, the Elder's Natural History, Polybius's histories which famously describe their use in funerals. Archaeological findings, though actual wax masks rarely survive due to their fragility. Plaster moulds have been found, and funerary reliefs that depict ancestral figures to understand the precise form, ritualistic significance, and social function of the imagines in Roman aristocratic society. Furthermore, the very act of displaying death mass in the living space of the atrium, which also served as a reception area, underscored a distinctive Roman comfort, with death as a continuous part of life. Unlike cultures that might revere ancestors in separate temples or tombs, the Romans brought their illustrious dead directly into the home, making them a constant, visible presence in daily life, constantly reminding you of your lineage, your duties, and your inevitable mortality. This intimate proximity to the deceased, even in their waxen form, was a unique and often unsettling aspect of aristocratic Roman family life. The psychological toll of being surrounded by these lifelike representations of your ancestors would be immense. You would constantly be aware of their gaze, feeling the weight of their expectations, the pressure to live up to their achievements, and the fear of bringing shame upon their honoured names. This pervasive sense of ancestral presence could be a source of inspiration, but also of profound anxiety and a feeling that your life was not entirely your own, but a continuation of a long, predetermined family saga. Your individuality was subtly overshadowed by the collective weight of your illustrious dead. The political utility of the imagines was not lost on Roman politicians. In a society where family reputation was paramount for political success, the visual display of a long line of consuls and triumphant generals in your atrium was a powerful piece of non-verbal propaganda. It served to subtly intimidate rivals, attract clients, and remind the public of your family's inherent fitness for leadership, simply by entering your home. This made the imagines a constant, silent, yet potent weapon in the brutal arena of Roman politics, ensuring that even the dead contributed to the power struggles of the living. So, your experience of ancient Roman funerary rites was profoundly disturbing due to the eerie presence of the imagines, these lifelike wax masks of your ancestors, displayed prominently in your home and paraded in funeral processions, were a chilling reminder of the deceased's enduring family influence and a constant public display of power. This unique and unsettling form of ancestral veneration, blurring the lines between life and death, was a defining, profoundly unsettling aspect of ancient Roman funerals, ensuring that the deceased continued to exert their influence over the living, forever watching from the shadowy corners of your home. You've witnessed the chilling conclamatio and death watch, participated in the grand public spectacle of the funeral procession with its wailing mourners and actors wearing ancestral masks, endured the terrifying inferno of the funeral pyre, contemplated your final resting place in crowded columbaria or anonymous pits, maintained the demanding ancestor cult with its food and wine offerings to the restless dead, and even experienced the brutal human sacrifice of gladiatorial games at your own funeral. Finally, you've grappled with the eerie, lifelike presence of the imagines, your ancestors perpetually watching from the atrium. As the distant trumpets of the pompa funebri fade and the imagined scent of burning incense dissipates, a profound, lingering truth settles upon you. Ancient Roman funerals were not just solemn farewells, they were a deeply disturbing blend of profound reverence, elaborate ritual, pervasive fear of the dead, and immense social and political display, profoundly shaping every aspect of Roman life. The all-encompassing nature of death rituals. Consider the fundamental integration of death into daily Roman life. For the Romans, death was not a private event to be hidden away, it was a public spectacle, a profound social and religious ceremony that permeated every level of society, from the moment of death to the final interment. Your passing triggered a series of meticulously choreographed rituals designed not just to honour the deceased, but to validate the living, reinforce social hierarchies, and maintain cosmic order. Every step, every gesture, every wail, and every offering was imbued with deep meaning, ensuring that death was a constant, unavoidable presence. It truly sucked to have your mourning be a public performance, a macabre theatre displaying status in death. Then there's the macabre theatricality, an immense display of status inherent in these rituals, the funeral procession, with its hired mourners, musicians, and, most disturbingly, actors wearing the wax mask images of your ancestors, transformed the streets of Rome into a stage. Your funeral was a powerful piece of non-verbal propaganda, meticulously designed to publicly demonstrate the wealth, power, and enduring influence of your family, the grandeur of the pyre, the lavishness of the tomb, and the number of participants all served as a chilling testament to the deceased and the family's standing in Roman society. This public performance of grief and lineage ensured that death became another arena for social competition and political manoeuvring. You literally became part of your family's advertising campaign. Even in death, the fearful dead spirits, sacrifices and threats. And what about the pervasive fear of the dead and the demand for sacrifice? The Romans believed that neglecting the deceased could lead to restless, malevolent spirits, larvae or lemures haunting the living, bringing misfortune or illness. This fear drove the meticulous adherence to every ritual, from the coin for Quran to the regular offerings of food and wine at the tomb. Most disturbingly, the ancient origins of gladiatorial games, as private munera staged at funerals, highlight the brutal belief that shedding human blood could honour the deceased and purify their spirit. This constant negotiation with the supernatural, ensuring the peace of the dead through elaborate and sometimes violent acts, permeated every aspect of Roman life, turning reverence into a form of active fear and constant appeasement. It truly sucked to be haunted by your own ancestors if you forgot their favourite snacks. A glimpse of the underworld, unsanitary realities. Finally, the uncomfortable blend of sacred ritual and unsanitary reality. While Roman society strived for order, the death rituals often exposed its grimmer side. The decomposition of bodies, even if briefly displayed, the accumulation of offerings at tombs, and the eventual overcrowding of necropolises and catacombs all contributed to unsanitary conditions. The lack of germ theory meant that purification rituals, while spiritually significant, did little to prevent the spread of disease. The pervasive presence of death, both visually and olfactorily, was an undeniable aspect of these elaborate customs, ensuring that the pursuit of spiritual peace often coexisted with very physical discomforts. A society shaped by death, the enduring legacy, the overall impact of Roman funerals was immense, profoundly shaping social hierarchies, political ambitions, and daily life. Death was not a finality, but a continuous relationship, a dynamic interaction between the living and the dead that reinforced family identity, civic duty, and a pervasive awareness of mortality. The rituals, complex and often disturbing, served as a powerful glue, binding Roman society through shared beliefs about continuity, memory, and the enduring power of lineage. Even if that lineage was built on wax mass and the blood of gladiators, the living legacy, beyond the stone and ash one, particularly poignant, and often overlooked. Detail is how the personal memory of the deceased often outlasted the grandest rituals and monuments. While aristocratic families used imagines and elaborate funerals to project their nobilitas for generations, the true, enduring legacy of an individual Roman, particularly for common citizens, often rested in the memories and oral traditions of their immediate family and close friends. Simple epitaphs on tombstones, often crafted with deep personal affection, provide a more intimate glimpse into the love and grief of ordinary Romans. Beyond the grand political performances, these humble memorials, alongside the more opulent ones, highlight a universal human desire to be remembered, regardless of wealth or status. Historians still meticulously study Roman personal letters when surviving. Private funerary inscriptions often carved by family members for their loved ones, and depictions of intimate mourning on smaller sarcophagi to understand the precise emotional realities and personal connections to the deceased, often revealing a heartfelt desire for remembrance that transcended the grand, public spectacle of elite funerals. This reveals that the rituals were not just about abstract social functions, but also about genuine human bonds. Ultimately, your journey through the disturbing rituals of ancient Roman funerals reveals a profound truth about Roman society. It was a world where death was not an ending, but a continuation, a public spectacle inextricably linked to power, social status, and a pervasive fear of the supernatural, the elaborate ceremonies, the gruesome sacrifices, the overwhelming displays of wealth, and the constant negotiation with the spirits of the dead all combined to make ancient Roman funerals a defining, profoundly disturbing aspect of daily life, ensuring that even in death, your legacy was a complex blend of reverence, fear, and enduring influence. As you now drift into a deep, comforting sleep, let the distant sounds of ancient lamentations and the imagined solemnity of Roman necropolises finally subside. You are safe, in your own time, far removed from the brutal realities of ancient death rituals. May your dreams be peaceful, filled with the quiet certainty of dignified rest, a personal farewell, and the profound comfort of a world where the deceased find peace without such elaborate demands or lingering fears. A stark contrast to the disturbing truth we've explored tonight. And now, good night, and have sweet dreams.